I know I haven't been up here in about 4 years. The reason why I didn't come up here all last year is because we were filming the service and the camera didn't reach that high. It was not a deep theological reason at all. So here we are. So according to a whole bunch of people posting on social media, yesterday was supposed to be the rapture. Did you know this? Well, it was. The rapture is the day when Jesus is going to return and all the righteous believers on earth, both the living and the dead, are supposed to be pulled into heaven. I'm not sure whether to offer condolences or congratulations that we're still here. As I commented to a friend on Facebook, I didn't even know the rapture was happening yesterday, so what does that say about my chances? Now, the belief in the rapture is held by many Christian groups, mostly those who follow a more literal reading of the Bible, because it's based on something the Apostle Paul wrote to the early Christian community in Thessalonica, and it does describe the rapture, though it doesn't use that word. But many theologians, including Christian theologians, have disputed it. And they say it's actually based on a faulty translation of the Greek into English, and that Jesus taught absolutely nothing like this. But a lot of people believe in it. And every few years, someone comes up with a new date for the rapture, and then they have to come up with reasons why they miscalculated. And this has been going on for a long time. In fact, in the mid-19th century, right here in Groton, some of you know about a group of people who were called the Millerites. And they believed that the rapture was coming so fervently that they gave away their farms and their animals and their houses and their possessions. And on October 22nd, 1844, which they called Ascension Day, they and their fellow believers put on white robes and climbed onto roofs and into trees. And they did this because they were trying to get as high as possible so God wouldn't miss them, which I find so dear somehow. October 23rd, 1844 was known as the Day of Great Disappointment. I also wonder if for some of them it was actually the Day of Great Relief, but I also wonder what happened about the houses and the farms and the possessions that they gave away. And while the Millerites and all the others who have followed may seem a bit extreme to us, I think there's something about having a deadline for trying to get things right. I think there's something about having a date for getting right with ourselves, right with each other, right with the God of our understanding. That's kind of important. As I talked about last week, it is so easy to forget that we do not have all the time in the world. And even if we don't believe the world is ending soon, despite the pretty dire news from climate scientists, our individual lives are going to end. And putting things right, or accepting what we cannot put right, is really, really hard, which may be why we put it off and put it off and put it off and always think we have more time. So Yom Kippur is really an annual deadline for putting things right. And it comes every year, which is why I love it so much, and which is why I invite you into it every year, Jewish or not, because every year we get to try again. We get to do the whole process again and try to make a little progress. And there's a theological understanding in Judaism that I think is so essential, which says that forgiveness is essential to being human. Because being human means we make mistakes, and some of them are very serious. Being human means we cause hurt, most often to the people we love the most. And those very same people hurt us in ways that matter. It's kind of a mess, but I don't know anyone who has escaped it. I also know that forgiveness is a really hard word, and so are some of the words related to forgiveness, words like mercy, reconciliation, redemption, all of which are different ways of talking about teshuvah, that work of turning, the work of returning, of finding our way back to each other and back to ourselves. I also know that some of you really, really don't like this sermon. You don't like it when I talk about forgiveness. I get complaints on the Sundays that I talk about forgiveness. And I think there are some reasons why I get complaints. And one might be is because people assume that when I say forgiveness, I mean forgetting, or acting as if the wrong that was done to you or the consequences of that wrong aren't supposed to matter anymore or aren't important. Or maybe it's because some of you think that I'm saying you have to forgive in order to be a good person, as if anyone could ever determine that for someone else. They can't, because forgiveness is a deeply personal endeavor. But then there's also the truth, the reality that talking about forgiveness is uncomfortable. It brings up old sorrows. It asks us to consider our regrets. And it leads us into those places that are not yet healed, maybe. Places that most of us, including me, would rather not spend a lot of time in because they hurt. So I understand. And if this is the case for you, I hope that you will forgive me and that you will move gently in those places with deep compassion for yourself. Deep compassion is the key here. The older I get, the more I believe that forgiveness is about having deep compassion for ourselves. That it's about putting down the things we don't want to carry with us anymore because it hurts to carry them. And it's about setting people free, whether or not they ever know about it. Actually, I think forgiveness has a lot less to do with other people than we might imagine. I think it's more about ourselves. It's more about loving ourselves. It's more about putting burdens down for our own sake, setting ourselves free because we don't want to be tied to certain people or to certain stories anymore. Not that we can change what has happened, but we can change our hold on what has happened. And that's a pretty powerful thing. I also find that usually the person we find the hardest to forgive is ourselves. So often we hold ourselves accountable in the harshest of ways. So often we have no mercy for the ways we have fallen short. The Jewish theologian Lawrence Kushner says that self-forgiveness is actually the deepest purpose of teshuvah, or turning. He writes, accepting ourselves, forgiving ourselves, it doesn't mean that we're proud of what we did. It does mean we have taken our mistakes, our regrets, back into ourselves, that we have acknowledged them as a part of who we are, that we have done our best to repair the injury, but we no longer reject any part of who we have been, because it's all part of who we are. And who we are is an expression of the holy. Aurora Levins Morales is a Puerto Rican Jewish writer. And a couple of years ago, she wrote a poem for the Jewish high holidays that's about releasing ourselves from our regrets, releasing ourselves from the shame that we carry, releasing ourselves from everything that keeps us from knowing ourselves and one another as holy and whole. She invites us to enter the new year loose-limbed and burdenless, as she put it. So here is her poem, which I offer to you as a blessing for Yom Kippur. Let them go like birds released from cages. Let them go like fruit rinds giving themselves to the soil, like pebbles rolling away underfoot, like crumbs scattered for pigeons, like sweat dripping from our brows. If we have messed up, let it go into the great compost heap and become the nutrients for new seeds, new intentions, new blessings. If others have hurt us, let clean water irrigate the wounds and let the runoff water gardens. Let grudges crumble to dust. Let shame dissolve into loam, and let each harsh word we hurl at ourselves be turned into petals before they land. Let everything, all of it, be recycled. Let the trash become jewels we string into necklaces and drape around each other's necks. Let us enter the year burdenless, loose-limbed, and lie down on the dark earth. Let tiny rootlets emerge from our fingers. Let us be ourselves into the new year, like autumn bulbs packed with unimagined colors, ready to wake and bloom.